Embracing presence for your inner peace and fulfillment. Introduction. There is a moment, quiet, still, unnoticed, when life offers you a choice, not the kind written in bold decisions or grand gestures, but something far more subtle. It is the choice to be here or to be elsewhere, to breathe consciously or to race forward unconsciously, to respond with clarity or react with noise. That moment is happening now. We are drowning in motion. The world spins faster each day, and in our rush to keep up, we abandon the only thing we truly possess, the present. We scroll instead of seeing, speak instead of listening, react instead of understanding. And yet, beneath the chaos, there is a whisper that never leaves us. A whisper that asks, what if there is more? This audiobook is not about detaching from the world. It is about mastering it internally. It's about reclaiming the space between stimulus and response, finding strength not in control, but in awareness. True power doesn't shout. It observes. It breathes. It chooses. Mindful living is a discipline, not a retreat. It demands your attention, your honesty, your willingness to face discomfort. But in return, it offers something rare, peace that does not collapse under pressure, fulfillment that does not fade, a clarity that cuts through the fog of overthinking, overstimulation, and overcommitment. This is not an escape. It is a return to the self that has always been there, waiting beneath the noise, patient and present. Each chapter will challenge you. Each concept will demand your engagement. But if you allow it, what you will gain is not just stillness, it is power, the kind of power that cannot be taken, only cultivated. Presence is not passive. It is the ultimate act of Chapter 1. The cost of disconnection. You wake up, and the first thing you reach for isn't your breath, it's your phone. Notifications, headlines, messages. Before your feet touch the floor, the world has already intruded. The day hasn't begun, yet your mind is occupied, fragmented, pulled into 10 different directions. You're answering questions you never asked, reacting to events you have no control over. This is the modern ritual, and it is costing you more than you realize. We are surrounded by information, but starved for meaning. We are constantly stimulated, yet profoundly numb. The average person touches their phone over 2,500 times a day. But when was the last time they touched their own thoughts with that same frequency? We are living in an age of disconnection, disguised as hyperconnection. We communicate more, but understand less. We consume endlessly, yet feel perpetually unfulfilled. We multitask, but never truly experience. This disconnection is subtle. It doesn't announce itself. It creeps in. One compromise at a time. One "I'll do it later." One ignored intuition. One numbed emotion. Until we wake up one day and realize we don't recognize our own lives. We move from task to task, week to week, year to year, functioning, but not living. And what's most dangerous is this: we've normalized it. We've made stress a badge of honor, busyness a measure of worth, productivity a surrogate for meaning. But no amount of efficiency can replace presence. No number of accomplishments can compensate for a lack of inner alignment. You can win the race and still feel lost if you never stop to ask why you were running in the first place. Mindfulness, in its purest form, is not about slowing down. It is about showing up, fully, unequivocally, without distraction, without pretending, without apology. It's not about having perfect thoughts. It's about noticing the ones you have. It's not about peace as a mood, but presence as a habit, a trained discipline of the mind, a chosen return to what is real. The cost of disconnection is subtle. It's the unfinished conversations, the shallow breaths, the anxiety that hums in the background, the sleepless nights, the feeling that something is missing, even when you can't name what. This isn't accidental, it's structural, but structure can be rebuilt. Patterns can be broken. Awareness is the first fracture in the wall. This chapter will reveal where we've gone astray, not as a critique, but as a mirror. Because the truth is simple, you cannot heal what you do not see, and you cannot reclaim what you do not acknowledge was lost. To reclaim presence, you must first understand how it slips through your fingers. Disconnection doesn't announce itself with sirens, it seeps in quietly, disguised as convenience, disguised as entertainment, disguised as necessity. You begin by outsourcing your attention, first in small ways, background noise while you work, scrolling through feeds when silence stretches too long. Then it escalates. You stop trusting boredom, you start fearing stillness. You begin equating silence with discomfort and presence with stagnation. But this is the lie, that busyness equals meaning, that noise equals importance, that constant motion somehow leads to progress. It doesn't, it leads to exhaustion. You can run at full speed and still go nowhere if your direction is undefined. And here is the truth. Most people don't lack time, they lack alignment. Energy is not wasted in doing too much. It is wasted in doing what doesn't matter. When you operate in disconnection, everything feels urgent, but nothing feels significant. Every message demands a reply. Every task feels like a crisis. Your nervous system never lands. You are always alert, always reactive, and the moments that should nourish you, meals, conversations, moments of beauty, become background noise in a life turned up too loud. This isn't sustainable, but more importantly, it isn't necessary. You are not here to be a machine. You are not here to perform, produce, and repeat until burnout becomes your baseline. You are here to experience, to feel the air on your skin, to notice the tension in your shoulders before it becomes pain, to hear the emotion behind someone's words instead of rushing to your response. You are here to connect, first to yourself, then to the world. But connection requires access, and you cannot access what you've numbed. Mindfulness begins as a rebellion, a refusal to be consumed, a rejection of the default mode. It begins with the decision to pause, to notice the sensation in your body, the texture of your thoughts, the emotion hiding behind your irritation, and in doing so, you begin to interrupt the pattern. Each moment of awareness is a subtle revolution, one breath, one step, one choice at a time. You may think that mindfulness is soft, passive, even indulgent, but understand this: to be fully present in a world built on distraction is one of the most courageous acts of our time. It demands strength, discipline, and clarity. It asks you to stop pretending and start participating, not in what's trending, not in what's urgent, but in what's real. The first cost of disconnection is your peace, but the deeper cost is more devastating. It's the loss of your life, moment by moment, unnoticed and unlived. But that can change. The shift begins with awareness. The work begins now. Awareness is not about judgment. It is about recognition. The moment you see the pattern, you create space. And in that space lies your freedom. Most people don't realize that they're stuck in a loop, because the loop is all they've ever known. They confuse familiarity with truth. But comfort zones aren't safe. They're silent prisons. When your mind is always somewhere else, your life becomes a blur. Time passes, but it doesn't feel lived. Presence returns you to your life. And while that might sound poetic, it is profoundly practical. When you are present, your decisions sharpen. You stop overthinking, because you're no longer reacting to a fantasy of what might happen, you're responding to what is. You begin to listen, not just with your ears, but with your attention. You see what's been right in front of you, the moments you've overlooked, the subtle emotions, the opportunities wrapped in the mundane. The reason this shift is so powerful is because it breaks the illusion that fulfillment is somewhere else. That peace will come when your schedule clears, or when the project is finished, or when the right person arrives. Mindfulness shatters that belief. It reveals a simple, inconvenient truth. You don't need to get anywhere to be at peace. You just need to be where you are, fully. This sounds easy. It is not, because presence requires you to stop hiding. It requires you to feel the discomfort you've been avoiding, the restlessness, the loneliness, the buried exhaustion. But here's the paradox. By facing it, you begin to dissolve it. Emotions that are acknowledged lose their grip. Thoughts that are seen lose their speed. And in their place arises a kind of calm that is not dependent on circumstance. A calm that does not need conditions to exist. This is not about perfect mindfulness. This is about practice, progress. One breath, one return, one conscious choice. Over and over. As you move through this book, you will not be asked to adopt a philosophy or pretend to be enlightened. You will be asked to engage, to look closely, to feel fully, and to live intentionally. There are tools, strategies, and shifts to be made, but none of them will matter if you are not present for them. Presence is the soil. Without it, nothing you plant will take root. Now that you've seen the cost of disconnection, the next step becomes obvious. Reconnection. Chapter 2. Reconnection. The path back to now. To reconnect is not to go back. It is not a nostalgic return to some idealized past. Reconnection is about anchoring yourself into this very moment with clarity and intention. It is about reclaiming the ability to notice, not with analysis but with attention, because what you do not notice, you cannot change, and what you do not feel, you cannot heal. Reconnection is not a grand act, it is subtle. It begins in the mundane, in the way you pour your coffee, in how you open a door, in how you speak someone's name. Every small action holds an invitation to return to yourself. You don't need to escape to the mountains or take a vow of silence. You need to slow down just enough to inhabit your life again. This is where most people hesitate. They believe they need a full retreat, a total reset, a dramatic change. But this is avoidance in disguise. You don't need a different life. You need to relate differently to the life you already have. And that begins with a shift in posture, from autopilot to awareness, from reaction to response, from drifting to choosing. Ask yourself this: when was the last time I experienced something ordinary as extraordinary? A sip of cold water, the sound of leaves, the feeling of breath. Not as a performance, not to check off a box, but because you were truly there. That is the essence of reconnection. It is not about adding more, it is about subtracting distraction, stripping away the unnecessary until only what matters remains, and what remains is powerful. Your presence, your attention, your capacity to fully engage with what's in front of you. This is the birthplace of clarity. When the noise subsides, the truth surfaces. You start to notice the tension in your body before it becomes pain. You feel the hesitation in your voice before it turns into regret. You become intimate with your own internal signals, and when you're attuned to yourself, the external world stops dictating your every move. Reconnection is radical because it puts the power back in your hands, not as control but as awareness. And in awareness, there is choice. Every moment becomes a crossroad. You can react, or you can respond. You can run from discomfort, or you can sit with it. You can numb out, or you can tune in. It's in these choices that your life is sculpted, not by fate, not by others, but by your presence. Reconnection is not a task to complete. It is a relationship to cultivate, ongoing, imperfect, and deeply personal. It requires you to slow your internal tempo, to shift your attention inward without getting lost in yourself. It's not about overanalyzing every thought. It's about noticing what arises without becoming consumed by it. You become the observer, not the reactor, the witness, not the prisoner. This is where your power lives, not in controlling every detail of life, but in managing your attention. Where your attention goes, your life follows. Every distraction, every unconscious scroll, every minute spent lost in thought is a moment disconnected from your reality. But this isn't a call to guilt, it's a call to agency. You have the ability to pause, to reset, to choose again and again. Small practices sharpen this ability. A single breath before you respond to a message. A moment of silence before you walk into a room. 5 seconds of noticing the sounds around you before you begin your day. These are not spiritual exercises. They are recalibrations, reminders that you are not a machine, and this moment is not disposable. Presence builds on itself. Each choice you make to come back to yourself, to your breath, to your environment, strengthens the neural pathways that support awareness. And over time, what was once effort becomes instinct. You begin to live in rhythm with your reality, rather than racing ahead of it. You stop needing chaos to feel alive. There is profound power in living with intention. When you are present, you see patterns clearly. You hear what's left unsaid. You sense energy before words are spoken. Your instincts sharpen, not because you're thinking harder, but because you're fully here. Distractions numb your instincts. Attention brings them back online. Reconnection makes you more effective, not less. It strips away the excess that clutters your mind and saps your energy. You no longer waste effort proving yourself, defending every opinion, chasing every validation. You move differently, not slower, but more deliberately. There's a weight to your words, a depth to your actions. You are no longer reacting. You are choosing, building, refining. And in that, people notice. They may not know what's different, but they'll feel it. The stillness behind your eyes, the calm in your responses, the way you hold space in a conversation without needing to fill every silence. You become grounded in a world that's constantly floating, reliable in a world of volatility, centered even when the ground shakes. Because when you're connected to yourself, external turbulence loses its power to control you. To reconnect is to reclaim sovereignty over your attention. In a world constantly tugging at your focus, this is not a small act, it is a declaration. When you choose presence, you are choosing to no longer be a passive participant in your life. You stop outsourcing your experience to external triggers and begin directing the quality of your inner world, and the inner world, once clear, reshapes everything else. Reconnection isn't about perfection, it's about consistency. There will be days when your mind wanders, when you forget to pause, when reaction sneaks in before reflection. That's not failure. That's the practice. The real power is in your return, your willingness to come back to this moment again and again, without shame, without judgment, with full ownership. This practice doesn't just serve your peace, it sharpens your edge. You'll notice when you're being pulled into conversations that drain you, when tasks that once defined your worth no longer hold value, when a habit you've defended no longer serves who you are becoming. Presence gives you perspective, and with perspective, you begin to see what actually matters. In this clarity, your relationships shift. You stop listening to respond and start listening to understand. You stop performing and start expressing. And as your relationship with yourself deepens, so too does your connection with the world around you. People feel seen around you, not because you're trying to impress, but because your attention is undivided. That is rare. That is powerful. You begin to trust your own rhythm. You stop chasing the pace of the crowd. You work, rest, speak, and move in ways that align with your energy, not someone else's urgency. And in this autonomy, you gain something few people ever taste: inner freedom. A state where your peace is not dictated by outcomes, and your clarity isn't borrowed from outside voices. The more present you become, the more patterns you see. You recognize what triggers your disconnection. You see the subtle shifts, the tightening of your chest, the shallowness of breath, the urgency in your tone. These become signals, not punishments. You respond not with shame, but with return. Every signal is a call to come back. Not to fix, but to feel. Not to escape, but to engage. This is the practice of mindful living. Not a trend, not a temporary solution, but a lifetime commitment to showing up fully, honestly, without armor. From disconnection to reconnection, the shift is not far. It's as close as your next breath. And from that breath, we now move forward to the power of attention itself. Chapter 3. The Weapon of Attention. Attention is not passive. It is a weapon, sharp, directional, and powerful. Where it lands, energy flows. What it ignores, withers. Most people squander it. They let the world dictate where it goes, allow others to hijack it, and spend their lives reacting rather than choosing. But attention is your most valuable currency. If you do not control it, someone else will. From advertisements to conversations, apps to politics, everything around you is competing for it. And not casually, aggressively. Every color, sound, alert, and story is engineered to capture your gaze and hold it long enough to shape your behavior. They don't want your money first. They want your mind, because once they have that, the rest follows. This is not paranoia. This is strategy, and you need a strategy of your own. You must begin to see attention not as something you give away, but something you invest. Each day, you are investing in something consciously or not. A fear, a habit, a goal, a wound. Attention doesn't discriminate. It nourishes whatever it touches. If you continually feed your distractions, they grow. If you water your insecurities, they strengthen. But if you direct that same focus toward what grounds you, your breath, your values, your purpose, you begin to build an internal architecture that cannot be easily shaken. The first step is observation. Where does your attention go? When you're tired? When you're overwhelmed? When you're alone? Start mapping these patterns. Most attention leaks are tied to discomfort. You're not checking your phone because it's interesting. You're checking it to avoid. Avoid silence. Avoid feelings. Avoid presence. The avoidance becomes instinct, and instinct becomes identity. But here's the pivot. Attention can be trained, like a muscle. It grows stronger the more you use it with intention. You begin by focusing on small, controlled environments. One conversation without glancing away. One task without switching tabs. One meal without screens. These aren't trivial. They're foundational. They're how you reclaim the steering wheel of your life. Controlled attention unlocks power. It allows you to go deeper, not just wider. You stop skimming through experiences and start absorbing them. Memory improves. insight increases. You start noticing the subtleties, body language, unspoken cues, shifts in mood. This sensitivity is not weakness. It's precision. And in a world addicted to noise, precision is a rare form of strength. This chapter is about more than just focus. It's about responsibility. Because what you give your attention to, you are giving your life to. And if you don't decide what's worthy of it, the world will do it for you. To train attention is to train freedom. Every time you redirect your focus from a distraction to a decision, you reclaim agency. You're telling your mind, we are not just passengers. We are the ones steering. That shift, though subtle, redefines how you move through the world. Suddenly, noise doesn't pull you in as easily. You start catching yourself mid-pattern. You pause before reacting. And in that pause you gain clarity. Attention is energy, and energy when diffused is weak. But when focused, it becomes impact. Consider a laser. It doesn't cover more ground than a flashlight. It simply channels its light with such precision that it cuts through steel. That's the power of attention. When fully aligned, it's not about doing more. It's about seeing deeper, sharper, cleaner. But attention has enemies. Distraction is obvious, but there are subtler ones: emotional clutter, unresolved narratives, mental fatigue. These drain your focus without you realizing it. You sit down to work, and suddenly your mind is reliving a conversation from 2 days ago. You start reading, and a loop of worry starts playing in the background. These aren't just nuisances, they're leaks, and left unchecked, they define your internal environment. Here's where mindfulness becomes tactical. It teaches you to observe without attachment. Not every thought deserves a dialogue. Not every emotion needs explanation. Some simply need space. When you train your attention to notice and release, not chase, you preserve your energy for what truly matters. You become the curator of your own mind. That curation is what separates the reactive from the intentional. The reactive chase what shines. The intentional choose what aligns. It's not about perfection. You will get distracted. You will get pulled. But with practice, the time it takes to return shortens. That's the mark of growth. Not that you never lose focus, but that you know how to come back without collapse. Over time, this becomes your edge. You enter conversations with presence. You listen fully. You execute tasks without splitting your energy across 5 screens. And people notice. Your words hit differently. Your decisions carry more weight. You don't appear busy. You appear effective. Because focused attention doesn't just change how you feel. It changes how the world responds to you. To wield your attention is to claim your power back from every place you've scattered it. You're not just managing time, you're shaping identity. And identity at its core is built by what you repeatedly focus on. So ask yourself, what am I teaching my attention to value? Because that is what your life will become. The most dangerous illusion is that your attention is neutral, that it can be given freely, without consequence. But attention is never neutral. It amplifies. It expands. It attaches value to whatever it touches. When you give attention to fear, fear grows. When you focus on conflict, your nervous system responds as if it were real. You rehearse stress. You replicate worry. But when you choose to shift your attention, deliberately, consciously, you change not just your thoughts but your biology. This is where attention becomes more than a mental tool. It becomes a physiological anchor. What you focus on alters your breath, your heart rate, your posture. A mind scattered across imaginary scenarios will always feel unsafe. A mind rooted in the present can respond rather than react. And the difference between those two states is where peace is either created or destroyed. Think about the environments you immerse yourself in, the voices you listen to, the content you consume. These are not passive interactions. They are shaping your internal world, sculpting the lens through which you interpret reality. You don't just watch things, you absorb them. They become reference points, beliefs, reflexes. That is the hidden cost of unconscious attention. It reshapes you without permission. But here's the opportunity. Attention once directed becomes a tool of design. You can choose what to build. You can intentionally expose yourself to ideas, people, spaces and actions that refine you, that challenge you, that bring you closer to the version of yourself that feels aligned, not admired, not popular, but real. This isn't about constant vigilance. It's about conscious redirection. Your mind will wander. That's not failure. That's its nature. But the return is where your strength lives. Every time you come back to your breath, your task, your purpose, you're creating mental resilience. You're proving to yourself, I am not owned by this noise. This is what it means to master attention, not to suppress distraction, but to outgrow it, to stop negotiating with it, to stop waiting for the world to calm down so you can focus. Instead, you build a core of calm within the storm. You become so rooted in your intention that chaos becomes background noise, not a controlling force. As this skill grows, so does your presence. You become more discerning, more focused, less reactive. Your mind sharpens, your days slow down without losing momentum, and your energy stops leaking into things that don't serve your path. In a world built on urgency and volume, attention is your quiet rebellion. And now that you understand its power, it's time to explore the next layer, intention. Because what good is attention if you don't know what to aim it toward? Chapter 4. Living with intention. Intentions are not wishes, they are declarations, quiet, clear, and potent. An intention is the internal compass that tells your attention where to go. Without it, even the most disciplined focus can drift into dead ends. But with it, every choice, every action, every pause becomes part of a larger, meaningful arc. Intention gives your life shape on purpose, not by accident. Most people drift through their days in reaction mode. They respond to whatever appears, pulled along by obligations, expectations, and emotion. Even their so-called goals are often borrowed from culture, from peers, from outdated identities. They chase what they think they should want, never questioning if it aligns with who they truly are, and so they move, achieve, exhaust, but remain unfulfilled. Living with intention means rejecting this autopilot. It means asking, why am I doing this, before you act? What matters here, before you engage? It's not about overthinking, it's about making sure your actions are rooted, not just rushed. There's a profound difference between momentum and direction. One can carry you forward, the other determines where you end up. Clarity is the foundation of intention, and clarity begins with discomfort, the willingness to sit with your real desires, not the ones that are convenient to admit. What do you want that you've been afraid to speak aloud? What matters to you that doesn't matter to the crowd? These are not light questions, but the answers hold your map. Intentions must be owned, not performed. You don't set them to impress, you set them to align. Alignment is when your actions match your values, not in grand gestures, but in the quiet details of your daily choices. You say no to what's shiny but shallow. You say yes to what's difficult but real. You slow down to verify, is this still true for me? Intentional living is not a perfectly organized life. It's a practiced awareness that asks again and again, am I living by design or by default? And if the answer is default, you pivot, not out of shame, but out of power. That pivot, done consistently, reshapes the arc of your life. The beauty of intention is its quiet authority. It doesn't clamor for attention. It doesn't chase validation. It simply guides. When anchored in intention, your actions become clearer, cleaner, more congruent. You stop needing to explain yourself to everyone. You stop chasing outcomes that look good but feel hollow. You move with a different kind of confidence, the kind that comes from internal coherence. But intention without structure becomes sentiment. It drifts, soft and unanchored. That's why intention must be translated into practice. A morning question, what do I want to embody today? An evening reflection, did my actions align with my values? Not to judge, to calibrate. These small rituals keep you oriented, especially when the world pulls you in competing directions. Intentional living is not rigid. It's responsive. It allows you to adapt without abandoning yourself. You're not locked into a script. You're just not available for everything. You protect your energy, not because you're fragile, but because you're focused. You understand that every yes costs something, and so you choose with clarity, not fear. The more you live with intention, the more sensitive you become to misalignment. You notice when a conversation drains you instead of energizes, when a task you once tolerated no longer serves, when a habit you adopted out of convenience begins to corrode your integrity. This awareness is a gift. It tells you where your boundaries need reinforcement, where your truth is being muted, and so intention becomes both filter and fuel. It helps you eliminate the excess and invest deeper in what matters. Your days begin to feel lighter, not because you're doing less, but because what you're doing means more. You stop managing time and start mastering alignment. The result is not perfection, it's presence, sharpened by clarity. When others drift, you remain anchored, not immune to chaos, but unclaimed by it. You're not just reacting to the world, you are designing your place within it. And that design, while subtle, has power. It shows up in your tone, in your posture, in your ability to be both calm and clear in a noisy room. This is not about control, it's about coherence. When what you believe, say and do align, you become unshakable. Intentional living is not about adding more to your life, it's about refining, subtracting what is not aligned, distilling your actions until only what matters remains. There's a strength in simplicity, not in doing less for its own sake, but in doing less of what distracts and more of what defines. The world will offer you endless paths, endless demands, endless invitations to conform, to hustle, to perform, but only one of those paths leads inward. Only one asks, is this mine? Not what your mentors said, not what your peers expect, mine. And that's the sacred work of intention. It draws a line between inherited ambition and personal truth. This work is uncomfortable. You will grieve identities that once served you. You will outgrow goals that once felt urgent. You will disappoint people who benefited from your lack of boundaries. But in return, you will meet yourself, not as a projection, not as a performer, but as a grounded, aware human being. One who is no longer chasing life, but shaping it. The byproduct of this alignment is not just peace, it's power. Power to say no without guilt. Power to move slower without losing progress. power to let go of what is loud but meaningless, in favor of what is quiet but essential. And from this power, your presence deepens. You become more available, not to everyone, but to what truly matters. Living with intention does not mean you will never feel lost. It means when you do, you'll know how to find your way back. Not by adding more, but by remembering what's true. Your attention fuels it. Your choices reflect it. Your presence embodies it. This is your compass. And as we move forward, we explore how this intention becomes action, deliberate, aligned, embodied. Not just ideas, but behavior, because mindfulness is not what you know, it's what you practice. Next we translate intention into motion. Chapter 5. Embodied action. Action is where theory either lives or dies. No matter how clear your intention, it must meet the world through behavior. Without action, mindfulness becomes sentiment, safe, comfortable, untested. But embodied action is where your values are proven. It's where presence takes shape in the world. You stop talking about being grounded and start moving like someone who is. This is where most people falter. They believe presence is a feeling, calm, spacious, almost romantic. But presence is a practice, and sometimes it's uncomfortable. To act mindfully in real life means making hard choices. It means saying no without softening the edge. It means standing still when everyone else is scrambling. It means walking away, staying quiet, speaking up on purpose. Embodied action isn't about pace, it's about depth. You can move quickly and still be present. You can slow down and still be disconnected. The difference is in the why. Why are you moving? Who are you serving? What outcome are you chasing? And is it one that truly matters? Clarity sharpens action. You no longer do things just to keep up. You do them because they align. That meeting you used to attend out of obligation, now you question its purpose. That habit you performed mindlessly, you bring awareness to it and ask if it still serves. This doesn't make you passive. It makes you strategic, focused, intentional. And yes, it can be lonely. The more aligned you become, the more obvious it is when others are not. You'll feel the dissonance when conversations lack substance. You'll notice the disconnect in places that used to feel comfortable. But this isn't a reason to turn back. It's confirmation you're evolving, that your inner architecture is now too solid to bend for approval. Embodied action turns your internal world into an external reality. And the more often you act in alignment, the more natural it becomes. Doubt fades, guilt fades. You no longer second-guess every decision because your choices aren't random, they're rooted. You know why you said what you said, why you walked away, why you stayed. Your behavior is a reflection of your truth, not a reaction to pressure. This is not a performance, it is integration. When your actions align with your inner compass, you stop wasting energy on pretending. There is no more internal debate, no more rehearsed explanations. What you do matches what you believe. And that consistency between thought, feeling, and behavior creates internal peace. Not the peace of stillness, but the peace of integrity. A calm that comes from knowing I am acting on what matters. This is where power matures, not in volume but in precision. You no longer scatter your energy across a dozen half-committed efforts. You choose one thing, and you show up for it completely. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to be true. And truth, when followed with action, builds momentum. One small aligned step leads to another, and another, until the path isn't something you chase, it's something you walk daily. That's the shift. From seeking clarity to embodying it, from waiting to becoming. You stop asking for signs and start being the signal. You become reliable to yourself first. You build confidence, not from affirmations or outcomes, but from the quiet track record of aligned choices. The message your behavior sends to your own nervous system is simple. We do what we say we will. Embodied action changes your presence. People feel it, not because you're louder or flashier, but because you mean what you do. There's no performance in your voice, no contradiction between your words and your posture. That kind of presence doesn't need to be announced. It lands without effort. It earns trust. It commands respect, not through dominance but through depth. But let's be clear, aligned action doesn't always feel good. It often feels like friction, like saying no when it would be easier to agree, like moving forward when you're uncertain, like holding your ground while others push for compromise. But that discomfort is not a sign you're wrong. It's a sign you're no longer outsourcing your decisions. When you choose the path that reflects your values, you begin to cultivate internal strength. The kind that doesn't require constant reinforcement. You don't need to justify yourself. Your behavior is your statement, and over time that consistency becomes identity, not a persona, but a presence that doesn't fluctuate with external noise. This is how a mindful life moves, with direction, with discipline, and with enough self-respect to follow through when it counts. Action, when embodied, becomes more than motion. It becomes expression, not of impulse or obligation, but of intention. You no longer act just to be seen or to check a box. You act because it reflects your principles. You send the email, end the conversation, show up to the commitment, because that's who you are choosing to be. And that choice, made consistently, rewrites your story. This is how discipline evolves. It stops being punishment and becomes devotion. You are no longer forcing yourself. You are aligning with yourself. There's a quiet but fierce energy in that. You are not motivated by adrenaline or fear. You're motivated by something cleaner: alignment. The sense that your steps are synchronized with your truth. And yes, this creates resistance, not just from the world but from within. Your old patterns will rebel. Your comfort-seeking habits will whisper seductions of ease, shortcuts, excuses. You will hear familiar voices trying to lure you back to the predictable. But now, you know the cost of that trade. You've seen what happens when you betray your own compass for comfort. So you stay the course. You act, even when uncertain. You follow through, even when it's inconvenient. You speak with restraint, not because you are silenced, but because your silence has become deliberate. You walk away, not out of avoidance, but out of clarity. These are not passive moves. They are deeply intentional. And they are noticed, not always praised but always felt. The goal is not a life without conflict. It is a life where your actions are no longer dictated by fear. You're not driven by urgency or external pressure. You are moved by something internal, calm, focused, immovable. And from this place, your actions begin to shape your environment. You're no longer just reacting to life. You're designing it. What you practice, you become. And when you practice embodied action, you become someone who cannot be easily manipulated. Someone who cannot be thrown off center by noise, by trends, by the volatility of the crowd. You move with clarity, not chaos. You engage with presence, not performance. You live with weight, not heaviness but depth. Now, action is no longer frantic effort. It is practiced presence, measured, grounded, alive. And when the doing is complete, there's only one thing left to rest, but not as escape, as integration, because even stillness, when approached with presence, becomes powerful. Chapter 6. The strength in stillness. Stillness is misunderstood. It's mistaken for passivity, weakness, even laziness. But true stillness, the kind you choose, the kind you cultivate, is one of the most powerful states a person can enter. It's not the absence of activity, it's the presence of full awareness, free from urgency. It's where your mind stops sprinting, your body stops bracing, and your attention stops scattering. It's where clarity is heard most clearly. In stillness, the truth emerges, not the loud, rehearsed truths you present to the world, but the quiet, inconvenient ones that live beneath the surface. This is why most people avoid stillness, not because they're too busy, but because stillness confronts them with what they've buried, the emotions they've outpaced, the questions they've ignored, the life they've built on autopilot. But here's the paradox: stillness doesn't slow you down. It strengthens your movement. It's the pause that allows you to see the field before you make your next move. It gives you leverage over your reactions, over your time, over your own internal chaos. It's where decisions become deliberate, not desperate. When you practice stillness, you begin to reclaim something ancient. You return to your own pace. You start to notice how much of your movement was noise, how much of your urgency was inherited, performative, or rooted in fear. And from this observation, you begin to choose again, more wisely, more intentionally. Stillness is not just something you find in meditation or silence. It's in the way you walk down a hallway, in the space between your words, in the breath before you respond. It's the inner calm that remains, even when the outer world is moving fast. You can be still in motion, just as you can be chaotic in rest. This chapter isn't about teaching you to stop. It's about teaching you to be with your thoughts, your discomfort, your tension, without rushing to resolve it. Because what you're willing to sit with, you begin to understand. And what you understand, you stop fearing. Stillness isn't where things end, it's where things become real. Stillness is not a luxury, it's a discipline. In a culture that glorifies constant motion, the act of doing nothing, intentionally, becomes radical. You aren't withdrawing from life, you're meeting it without flinching. You're not escaping challenges, you're refusing to be consumed by them. Stillness allows you to confront what is, not what you fear or what you hope, just what is. The greatest clarity often comes not when you're working harder, but when you stop pushing, when you step back, when you breathe, when you stop clawing for the next answer and give your mind space to settle. It's in that pause that deeper truths rise. Insights that elude you in motion start to take shape. Solutions that felt impossible now emerge with simplicity. And yet, stillness is uncomfortable, especially at first. It exposes everything that activity helped you ignore. Restlessness, boredom, self-doubt. The noise within becomes louder when the world goes quiet. But this isn't a signal to escape. It's an invitation to witness, to let your awareness grow wide enough, to hold discomfort without collapsing, to stay without needing to fix. This is how you build emotional endurance, not by escaping the hard moments, but by staying present with them, letting them stretch you, letting them teach you. You don't need to analyze everything. Some things just need to be seen, fully, without judgment, without solving. That kind of presence dissolves resistance. You stop fighting your experience and start observing it. And through that observation, something extraordinary happens. Space opens between thought and reaction, between tension and breath. In that space, choice returns. Not the frantic, reactive kind, but slow-rooted, deliberate choice. You start deciding your next move from alignment, not agitation, from grounded clarity, not mental clutter. Stillness doesn't demand hours of silence. It asks for attention, a few minutes with your phone off, your spine straight, your breath steady, a moment in the car where you don't turn on music, a walk without stimulation. These are not empty moments, they are recalibrations, opportunities to listen, not outwardly, but inwardly. The truth is, if you're always busy, you're always reacting. But when you create stillness, you begin to respond, and response, not reaction, is where your real power lives. Stillness is more than a tool. It's a threshold, a place you pass through to remember what's essential. It strips away the excess. It silences the noise that tries to convince you that urgency equals importance. In stillness, your values rise to the surface. You remember what actually matters, not what's trending, not what's loudest, but what's true. Most people confuse stillness with emptiness, but stillness is full of signals you've been missing, full of emotions you've numbed, full of wisdom that doesn't shout. To access it, you have to slow down enough to feel, to listen, to stop proving, and start observing. This doesn't mean life becomes passive. It means you build from a deeper place. You stop making decisions to escape discomfort and start making them to build alignment. Stillness trains you to stop seeking quick relief and start choosing lasting peace. And that shift, subtle but powerful, alters everything downstream. Your conversations become more intentional. Your work gains focus. Your rest becomes restorative instead of just recovery. Even in conflict, stillness serves you. It gives you space to feel anger without acting it out, to feel fear without obeying it. It's not suppression, it's sovereignty. You feel what arises without becoming it. You let the emotion inform you, not control you. That kind of restraint isn't weakness, it's mastery. And with time, you begin to crave stillness, not because life stops, but because stillness allows you to meet life fully. You become less reactive, more reflective. You listen more than you speak. You notice the energy in a room before deciding how to move through it. You learn to trust the quiet instincts over the noisy pressure. That trust, built over time, becomes your compass. Stillness isn't the opposite of strength. It's what sharpens it. It's where you recover clarity, where you refine your next move, where you stop pushing for a life and begin living one. This chapter isn't asking you to change everything. It's asking you to pause, to listen, to stop running just long enough to remember. You don't need to chase peace. You can return to it. Next, we explore the art of boundaries, not as barriers, but as expressions of self-respect. Because stillness once found must be protected. Chapter 7. The Architecture of Boundaries. Boundaries are not walls, they are doors with locks, designed not to shut the world out, but to decide what gets in. A boundary is not a rejection of others, it is an affirmation of self. It says, this is who I am, this is what I value, this is how I protect what matters to me. Without them, presence is impossible, because without them, your energy belongs to everyone else. In a world that rewards accessibility and speed, setting boundaries can feel radical. You say no, and people push back. You pause before replying, and they wonder if something is wrong. You don't respond to every message, every demand, every invitation, and it creates discomfort. Not because you're doing something wrong, but because you're doing something different. Boundaries disrupt patterns, especially patterns that benefited from your lack of them. Most people fear boundaries because they've been taught to equate them with conflict. But a boundary is not a fight, it's a filter. It removes what's unsupportive, before damage is done. It's preventive care for your mental, emotional, and even physical well-being. And more than anything, it's a form of clarity. When your boundaries are clear, your decisions become easier. You stop negotiating your worth with every request. You stop confusing guilt with guidance. Setting a boundary doesn't always mean speaking it aloud. Sometimes it's the way you move, the way you redirect a conversation, the way you no longer explain your choices. You don't need to announce that your time is valuable. You can act like it is. And when you do, the world begins to respond in kind. Not always immediately, not always easily, but inevitably. Because boundaries teach people how to treat you. They are not tools of control, but of communication. You're saying, this is where I end, and you begin. This is what I will engage with, and this is what I won't. You're not punishing, you're protecting. Not others from you, but yourself from depletion. And the more you honor your boundaries, the more you trust yourself. The more consistent your boundaries, the stronger your self-respect. Boundaries aren't rigid rules, they're responsive systems. They evolve as you do. What once felt acceptable may no longer align. And when you live mindfully, you begin to feel these shifts more clearly. That familiar tension after a conversation, that drained energy after a yes you didn't mean. These are signals, not of weakness, but of misalignment, and your boundaries are how you respond to them. The most dangerous boundary violations are the subtle ones, the ones you dismiss as no big deal. The comment you laugh off, the favor you resent but agree to, the time you sacrifice because it feels easier than explaining. One by one, these small compromises collect interest, until suddenly, you don't recognize the shape of your life or your role in shaping it. That's why clarity must precede boundaries. You can't protect what you haven't defined. What matters to you? What are your energetic limits? What drains you and what nourishes you? Until you name these, you'll keep operating on borrowed expectations, measuring yourself against standards that don't fit, saying yes to lives you don't want. But once you're clear, boundaries become simple, not easy but simple. You stop trying to explain them away. You stop offering disclaimers. You trust that someone misunderstanding your limits is not a reflection of your selfishness, it's a test of their respect. And if they cannot honor your clarity, they're revealing something valuable. Their proximity to your peace should change. This doesn't mean you withdraw. It means you become intentional. You choose what you give, when you give, and how you give. Not out of fear, but out of wisdom. Not from exhaustion, but from discernment. You no longer overextend to keep the peace. You hold your boundaries to build it. Boundaries also protect your presence. They free your attention from constant resentment. You're no longer mentally revisiting the things you agreed to but didn't want. You're no longer rehearsing your frustrations in silence. Instead, your mind is calm because your lines are clear. And from that calm comes access to joy, to focus, to true connection. People might leave when you set boundaries. Let them. What stays will be aligned. What remains will be rooted. You're not building walls, you're building doors, and you decide who walks through. Strong boundaries don't isolate you. They elevate your interactions. They create conditions where connection can be real, not rehearsed, where you don't have to twist yourself to fit in, where you don't have to manage other people's comfort at the expense of your own truth. With boundaries, relationships become honest, because you're showing up as you actually are, not as someone curated for acceptance. And honesty, even when it comes with friction, is a far better foundation than performance. People often wait for permission to set boundaries. They wait for the right time, the right language, the perfect mood. But clarity doesn't need a stage. It needs courage. You won't always be understood. You won't always be liked. But the deeper question is this: do you like the version of you that keeps betraying your limits to avoid discomfort? This isn't about becoming cold or distant, it's about becoming precise. You can still be kind, still generous, still warm, but your warmth no longer leaks into every open request. Your generosity is no longer harvested from your exhaustion. You give from your fullness, not for your validation. And that shift changes everything. Boundaries are an extension of your self-awareness. They reflect how deeply you've listened to your needs, how fully you've accepted your capacity, how clearly you've defined your values. And once you start honoring those edges, you stop expecting others to read your mind. You stop hoping they'll get it, because you've finally said it. With words, with action, with presence. And if they push back, that's just data. Because a boundary doesn't demand others change. It demands that you stay consistent. The more you reinforce your boundaries, the more grounded you become. You're no longer shifting with the tides of other people's urgency. You're no longer apologizing for what keeps you sane. You begin to move with the quiet confidence of someone who knows what is worth protecting, and protects it unapologetically. Boundaries aren't barriers to love, to connection, or to freedom. They are the structure that makes all three sustainable. Next, we turn to resilience. How presence helps you bend without breaking, and rise without rushing, rise without. Chapter 8. Resilience in real time. Resilience isn't about bouncing back. It's about bending well. It's the ability to stay rooted when life shifts suddenly, to remain clear when emotions surge, to respond with strength instead of panic. Real resilience doesn't pretend everything's fine. It doesn't bypass discomfort with positivity. It stays, it listens, it breathes through the moment rather than bracing against it. You build resilience in the small moments, when the meeting derails, when the unexpected news hits, when the day goes sideways. It's not a grand heroic trait. It's a practiced presence. The decision not to escalate. The pause before you spiral. The breath you take instead of reacting. That breath is the bridge. It connects intention to action. It's where mindfulness becomes embodied in adversity. Most people misunderstand resilience. They think it's about being tough, about never breaking. But strength without flexibility is brittleness. What doesn't bend eventually shatters. True resilience is fluid. It adapts without losing its core. It says, "This hurts, this is hard, and still, I am here, I am breathing, I am choosing my response." Presence is the foundation of that strength, because when you're present, you don't get swept away by fear of the future or regret of the past. You stay with what's happening now. You don't need to have all the answers. You just need to be awake enough to meet what's real. That awareness alone prevents escalation. It keeps your nervous system from locking into survival mode. Resilience isn't stoicism. It's not about being unbothered. It's about being responsive, not reactive. There's a quiet fierceness to it, a willingness to feel everything without becoming ruled by it. A clarity that remains, even in chaos. You might stumble, you might falter, but your return is faster. Your recovery is sharper. You know how to come back. And the more often you come back, the more trust you build in yourself. You stop fearing the fall because you've proven you can rise. Not always smoothly, not always quickly, but consistently. You are no longer fragile in the face of challenge. You are flexible. That's resilience, not perfection under pressure, but presence under strain. Resilience doesn't mean you don't feel the impact. It means the impact doesn't define you. Life will test you. Plans will collapse. People will disappoint. Emotions will surge without warning. But the question is never, will I be hit? The question is always, what will I do next? And in that space between impact and response, resilience lives. The mind loves to rehearse catastrophe, to anticipate every loss, to over-prepare for pain, but presence breaks that loop. It brings you back to what's actually happening, not the imagined version, but the real one. And often, what's real is far more manageable than what your fear projected. When you're present, you see the details that panic would have blurred. You notice what can be done, instead of drowning in what was lost. This doesn't mean resilience is emotionless. In fact, resilient people often feel more, but they've trained themselves to hold those feelings instead of being consumed by them. They don't rush to label discomfort as a problem. They stay with it, breathe into it, watch it shift, and it always shifts. No storm stays forever, but your ability to stay grounded while it passes, that's your edge. You build this edge not by avoiding difficulty, but by engaging with it consciously. Every setback becomes a classroom. Every challenge becomes a mirror. You stop asking, why is this happening to me? And start asking, what is this asking of me? That shift changes everything. It doesn't make you passive, it makes you powerful. Because now, you're not just surviving the moment. You're learning from it, shaping yourself through it. And you don't need dramatic rituals to build this resilience. You need repetition. You need awareness in the moments that tempt you to disconnect. A deep breath when the tension rises. A pause before the reaction. A willingness to slow down when urgency screams at you to rush. These tiny acts are how strength is built, not in intensity but in consistency. Over time you develop a quiet confidence. Not the loud kind that performs under pressure. The kind that knows, I've been here before. I've felt this before, and I know how to move through it. That confidence doesn't shield you from life's sharp edges, but it keeps you from being cut open by everyone. This is how presence becomes protection, not from pain but from unnecessary suffering. Resilience at its core is not about toughness, it's about trust. Trust in your ability to stay. Trust in your capacity to move through, not just over. Trust that you don't need to have everything figured out to keep moving forward. This kind of trust isn't built in moments of certainty. It's built when things fall apart and you choose to stay conscious anyway. There's a quiet liberation in knowing you can survive discomfort without numbing it. You stop fearing every difficult emotion. You stop needing constant reassurance. You understand that strength isn't the absence of struggle, it's your ability to meet struggle and stay connected to yourself in the process. This connection is what makes you resilient. It keeps you from becoming a stranger to your own experience. But resilience isn't just about enduring, it's about evolving. The storms you survive shape your presence. They sand away the unnecessary. They sharpen what's essential. You stop reacting from old stories and start responding from new awareness. What once triggered collapse now deepens focus. What once created panic now activates purpose. You also begin to recognize the difference between what requires endurance and what requires exit. Not every challenge is a test to overcome. Some are signals to change direction. Resilience doesn't mean tolerating what's toxic. It means knowing when to stay grounded and when to walk away with clarity. That discernment comes from presence, the ability to feel, reflect and choose, rather than be driven by conditioning or fear. As your resilience grows, so does your sense of self. You realize you're not fragile. You're not defined by the last hard thing that happened. You're fluid, adaptive, enduring, not in a hardened way, but in a wise way. You carry your experience, not as weight, but as architecture. It supports you, it strengthens you, It clarifies what matters and what no longer deserves your energy. In this way, presence doesn't just help you survive adversity, it helps you transform through it. You don't just return to who you were before the difficulty. You emerge clearer, sharper, more rooted. Resilience isn't about becoming untouchable, it's about becoming undiminished. Next, we explore gratitude, not as a performance, but as a powerful practice of realignment. Chapter 9. The Precision of Gratitude. Gratitude has been watered down, reduced to slogans, wrapped in performance, mistaken for toxic positivity. But real gratitude isn't fluffy. It's fierce. It doesn't ask you to deny pain or pretend everything's fine. It asks you to look directly at life, its mess, its pressure, its unpredictability, and still say, there is something here worth honoring. This is not about listing what you're thankful for so you can check off a box. This is about training your mind to recognize what is real amidst the noise. Gratitude is presence sharpened into focus. It says, even now, I see the value. Even here, I find the lesson. Even this, I won't ignore. True gratitude doesn't wait for perfect conditions. It shows up in complexity, in the quiet moments between challenges, in the breath you didn't think you had time to take. It isn't loud, it isn't dramatic. It's the internal nod you give to life as it is, before trying to fix, solve, or improve it. And when practiced with honesty, gratitude becomes alchemical. It doesn't erase difficulty, but it reframes it. Suddenly, the hard conversation becomes a sign of growth. The failure becomes a sharpening. The pause becomes sacred. Not because you're pretending it's all beautiful, but because you're choosing not to miss what's valuable inside the discomfort. This is not spiritual bypassing. It's emotional maturity. You're not being grateful instead of being real. You're being grateful because you're being real. Because despite all the chaos, there's still something stable, something you can return to. A moment, a truth, a lesson, an anchor. Gratitude makes the invisible visible. It reminds you that not everything is broken just because something is. It's also a pattern disruptor. The brain is wired to scan for threats, to seek problems, to fixate on lack. Gratitude interrupts that loop. It tells the mind, look again, there's more here. And the more you look, the more you see. Not in a delusional way, but in a disciplined one. This isn't about looking on the bright side. It's about training your awareness to not miss what's quietly working. Gratitude, when practiced deliberately, becomes a form of clarity. It's not about denying what's hard. It's about refusing to become blind to what's still true. It sharpens your awareness of what remains stable when everything else is shifting. It reveals strength you've normalized, beauty you've overlooked, and support you've taken for granted. This is not about romanticizing your circumstances. It's about learning to extract value from them. You're not pretending the wound doesn't exist. You're just refusing to let it eclipse everything else. You're letting your attention rest, even briefly, on what is still intact. That's power. That's perspective. That's presence. Gratitude also dismantles entitlement. It removes the assumption that anything is owed to you, that people should behave a certain way, that progress must unfold on your timeline. It replaces demand with observation. And when you observe carefully, you start noticing how much is already functioning in your favor, even when things feel incomplete. This shift changes how you move through the world. Your energy softens, not because you're passive, but because you're no longer resisting everything that doesn't go your way. You still set goals, you still strive, but you do it from fullness, not from lack. You pursue growth, not because you hate where you are, but because you honor it and want to expand on it. And perhaps most importantly, gratitude makes you more resilient. When life shakes, gratitude gives you handholds, a memory, a moment, a truth, something to grab onto. It grounds you in what's working, even as you navigate what isn't. And from that grounded place, your decisions improve, your energy stabilizes, your relationships deepen. It's also contagious, not performatively, but energetically. When you embody gratitude, people feel it, not because you say, "I'm grateful," but because your presence says it for you. You become harder to offend, quicker to recover, slower to judge. And in a world addicted to outrage and speed, that kind of presence becomes magnetic. Gratitude doesn't erase pain, but it balances the lens. It makes sure your awareness doesn't get hijacked by what's loud and difficult. It returns your focus to what's enduring, what's generous, what's still unfolding. You stop seeing life as something you're owed. You start seeing it as something you're in relationship with. Gratitude, when sustained, becomes more than a moment. It becomes a posture, a way of standing in the world that's rooted and awake. You're no longer waiting for external validation to feel grounded. You're no longer chasing peak experiences to feel alive. You start finding depth in the ordinary, meaning in the mundane, grace in the in-between. This is the quiet miracle of mindfulness. It turns regular moments into real ones. Gratitude is the lens that makes that shift possible. It teaches you to look again, to pause just long enough to see the difference between being alive and living. You realize that not every moment has to be perfect to be valuable, that not every season needs to be extraordinary to be meaningful. And the most powerful shift happens when gratitude stops being conditional, when it no longer depends on outcomes, circumstances, or mood. You start choosing it, even when it's inconvenient. Especially then, you choose it when the schedule's overwhelming, when the relationship's uncertain, when the future feels unclear. Not to escape those things, but to stay anchored in what's still working within them. This isn't about ignoring what's broken. It's about refusing to build your identity around it. Gratitude reminds you that you are more than your pain, more than your frustration, more than your ambition. It brings you back to what's essential: your breath, your capacity to choose, the people who show up, the opportunities to begin again. You don't need more to feel more. You need to see what's already here, sharply, soberly, fully. And the more you practice that kind of sight, the less reactive you become, the less desperate, the less easily thrown by delay or discomfort. You still want progress, but now you're not waiting for happiness at the finish line. You're living in alignment now. This is the power of real gratitude. It builds presence into your daily rhythm. It makes you strong in stillness, clear in adversity, open even when guardedness feels safer. And from that place, you begin to experience your life as it actually is, not just as a checklist of what's missing. Next, we arrive at the final chapter: integration, where every insight becomes embodied, and mindfulness becomes your way of being. It's your way. Chapter 10. Integration. Living the practice. Awareness is the spark. Intention is the guide. Action is the path. But integration, that is the embodiment. It's where the principles you've explored stop living in theory and start living in your choices, your posture, your responses. This is where mindfulness becomes who you are, not just something you practice when life feels quiet. Integration doesn't arrive with fanfare. It slips in gradually. You notice you're breathing slower in tense moments. You're responding instead of reacting. You're no longer exhausted by every demand because you've built boundaries that hold. You're no longer chasing clarity, you're carrying it. These changes aren't dramatic. They're steady, and they're unmistakable. The mistake many make is believing they need to be perfect to be integrated. But integration isn't about perfection. It's about returning, again and again, to what grounds you, to your breath, to your body, to your values. You will forget. You will drift. But each time you come back, you reinforce the path. And the path, walked often enough, becomes familiar, then natural, then you. It's not about rigid control. It's about conscious flexibility. You move with awareness even when plans shift. You stay connected even when emotions flare. You navigate challenge with clarity, because you've trained your nervous system to stay rooted. The world doesn't need to be calm for you to stay composed. Integration also brings a new kind of honesty. You stop pretending you're okay when you're not. You stop performing peace and start living it. Even when it's quiet, even when it's not impressive. You're less concerned with how things look and more focused on how things feel. And that shift, subtle, internal, reclaims your energy from performance and redirects it into presence. This is where the work becomes identity, not in a label or title, but in essence, you become the person who pays attention, who makes room for silence, who knows when to push and when to pause, who holds space in conversation instead of rushing to be heard, who protects their peace, not through withdrawal, but through precision. The practice is no longer something you do. It's something you are. Integration means your values show up without needing to be announced. You don't need to say you're grounded. People feel it in the way you hold yourself, in the way you listen without rushing, in the calm behind your decisions. Your mindfulness no longer requires explanation. It's visible in your presence, in how you speak, in when you don't speak. This level of embodiment doesn't come from intensity. It comes from repetition, not grand gestures but daily choices. The pause before you answer, the breath before you react, the moment of stillness you claim between obligations. These micro movements become your architecture. They make the practice less of a task and more of a thread, woven through every part of your life. You no longer need ideal conditions to live this way. Integration prepares you for the messy days, not just the quiet ones. It's in the traffic jam, the tense meeting, the complicated relationship. It's in how you recover after being triggered, in how quickly you return, not because you never leave presence, but because your return is trained. It's instinct now. And here's the deeper truth: you won't always feel mindful. You won't always feel peaceful or clear, but you'll know how to move anyway. Integration removes the need for constant emotional validation. You stop asking, "Do I feel like it?" and start asking, "What's aligned right now?" And that subtle shift from emotion-led to intention-led creates consistency. It allows you to show up with integrity, even when motivation wavers. You stop waiting for the right energy to arrive. You become the one who creates it. There's freedom in this. You no longer outsource your state of mind to external events. You no longer need every detail to fall into place before you access your calm. You have an inner infrastructure now, one that holds you steady when life moves fast, when plans fall apart, when emotions peak. And this infrastructure doesn't require explanation. It speaks for itself, in your tone, in your pace, in your presence. Integration isn't the end of the journey. It's the moment the journey becomes your way of being. Integration doesn't mean the work is done. It means the work is now embedded. You no longer chase presence. It's how you walk into the room. You no longer remind yourself to breathe. You notice when you haven't. You no longer force reflection. It arises naturally, in moments of stillness you've made space for. This is what real change looks like. Quiet, steady, unapologetic. It's not dramatic, it's durable. Your life starts to simplify, not by doing less but by needing less to feel whole. You stop seeking every answer outside yourself. You stop over-explaining. You stop rushing to fix, to prove, to perform. You are no longer living to catch up. You are living from a place of alignment. And from there your life becomes less about reaction and more about rhythm. You start trusting your own timing. You rest without guilt. You move without urgency. You don't need chaos to feel engaged. You don't need constant achievement to feel valid. You are at home in your own pace. That's what integration gives you. Not just peace but permission to be where you are. To work from presence, to grow without self-rejection. The world doesn't stop asking for more, but you stop offering what costs your peace. You recognize what's yours to carry and what isn't. You no longer say yes to avoid discomfort. You say yes to alignment, no longer out of fear of conflict, but from the strength of clarity. And perhaps most importantly, you stop waiting for arrival. You realize this is the practice, not a finish line, a way of moving, a way of choosing, a way of being fully alive inside the ordinary. You still make mistakes. You still get triggered. You still drift. But now you return faster. You recover cleaner. You reconnect more willingly. Because this is no longer a lesson you're trying to learn. It's who you've become. Not perfect, but present. Not untouched, but unshaken. This is mindful living. It's not something you do. It's who you are. Conclusion. Mindful living is not a destination. It is a continuous return, back to breath, back to self, back to what matters. Throughout this journey, you've explored the silent cost of disconnection and the quiet strength of reconnection. You've sharpened your attention, clarified your intentions, and moved through action, stillness, boundaries, resilience, and gratitude, not as abstract concepts, but as practices to live by. Every chapter wasn't just a message, it was an invitation to notice, to engage, to realign. But now comes the real work. The living mindfulness isn't something you arrive at and cross off a list. It's something you return to in every room you enter, every conversation you have, every decision you make. It's the awareness behind your words, the pause behind your choices, the breath beneath your reactions, and the more you return to that place, the more natural it becomes. You will forget, you will drift, you will feel overwhelmed.